This week from the global lane, the Islamic State claims credit for a Christmas massacre of Christians in Pakistan. Could the tragedy have been avoided? Can Pakistani Christians be safe in their churches? Christmas time in Taiwan. An American missionary, his family and team are bringing joy to school children. On the home front, security and military expert Thomas Donnelly joins us to talk North Korea. Who's the rogue regime really targeting with those ballistic missiles? Man on the street. Our Mung Fei Lee asked people about Christmas spending. Did they spend more this year on gifts? What were their big purchases? And my drive at home commentary. After the Christmas break, attention in Washington will focus in on federal spending. Will building Trump's wall be part of the budget? Is it a racist response or sound security policy? It's all happening right here, right now from the global lane. Pakistani security forces are on high alert across the country following a suicide attack December 17th by the Islamic State group. The attack targeted a church during Sunday worship, killing 9 people in Quetta. Quetta is the capital of southwestern Balochistan province. 60 worshipers were also injured in that church assault. It was the first attack on a church claimed by the IS affiliate in Pakistan. A mass funeral for those killed in the attack was held the following day. The provincial police chief, Muazzam Ansari, said security forces were trying to find those who orchestrated the attack. Joining us now with more on the Pakistan church tragedy is Wilson Chowdhry. He's president of Pakistani Christians, British Pakistani Christians out of London. Wilson, how did this happen? I thought there had been a warning from you and others about the possibility of an Islamic State attack against Pakistani Christians.
Well, in 2005, several newspapers wrote a story responding to a report we wrote to the High Commission of Pakistan, clearly indicating that there was an increase of threats to Pakistani Christian communities across the nation from groups claiming to represent IS, warning them that unless they converted to Islam, that they would be beheaded in IS-style killings. Our warning wasn't heeded. The government ignored it. The army actually went out and started giving letters to sending out letters to churches, warning them that IS was in the area and that they were purging their ranks of IS officers. However, nothing further happened from that. No extra security provision was provided. And I'm actually told that the church in Balochistan that was attacked was sending out messages to the government for at least the last 8 to 9 months, warning them that there'd been a heightened number of threats placed upon the church, asking them to convert to Islam or face dire consequences, which is what's happened during this Christmas time.
Okay, well, what about now? How would you describe the government's current efforts to protect churches from additional attacks this Christmas season?
There were private security officers inside the church. One of them is a Christian. It was a Christian himself who had a gun. He managed to hold the terrorists at bay. But the shooting exchange between both the perpetrators and the security officer resulted in a rapid response from security forces who arrived within 16 minutes and were able to kill one of the attackers before they got anywhere near the building. But the second one, realizing that his time was up, started shooting at the beginning of the building from outside and then detonated close to the church building, which caused the 9 deaths and the 52 or so who have now been registered as severe casualties.
Wilson, I have been to churches in Quetta, and I know that the security is pretty good. They're walled generally, several security guards. So how did they get through? I mean, authorities know that churches and Christians are often attacked during religious holidays like Easter and Christmas. Why aren't greater measures taken by the government to protect Christians at those times?
It's a question nobody can answer. They get warnings from us. They get warnings from others. We've reiterated several times that Easter and Christmas are specifically overt Christian celebrations. It doesn't matter what the government says, unless they put men with semi-automatic machine guns at the entrances of these churches, ensuring that these parishioners are protected. Nothing else will suffice. Believers need to pray for Christians in Pakistan. I mean, this is not the last bomb attack. You may not be aware of this. There was a bomb attack on the 1st of December. Even this month, there have been 2. That was also in Quetta. In that incident, a 7-year-old child was killed and a 4-year-old survived with severe injuries. These extremists are wise. They know where the security is. They know where the gates are. They know where the communities are. If we know, the government knows. Prayer is going to help. But perhaps we need to start sharing intelligence with churches, advising them on how they can ensure that their safety precautions are at their optimum. The churches need CCTV. Maybe some churches in the UK, America, Canada, may want to donate CCTV equipment or equipment that's practical that can help them in the get through the ongoing onslaught that Christians face.
Well, our thoughts and prayers, our hearts are certainly with the Pakistani Christians this Christmas season. And shifting gears a bit, I know it isn't just persecution against minority Christians in Pakistan. It's also happening in neighboring India. Now, I know some pastors were arrested in Madhya Pradesh while they were singing Christmas carols. So tell us what happened there, Wilson.
There were 32 seminaries and priests. The actual number of priests, I believe, was 2, and the rest were seminaries. So trainee priests from the Catholic Church who were going from building to building, singing carols, being quite jolly during this festive period of Christmas. They ended up in a building where they were singing when suddenly armed, men, a mob of Hindu fanatics entered the church and started to beat them, harass them. The men rushed to the police station, where they were then apprehended by the police after it was said that they had tried to forcibly convert Hindus. Now, these Hindu extremists are from the BJP party. They are Hindu nationalists who simply hate the idea of Christians being in their area, very much like the Muslims in Pakistan. And it seems to be worsening under the Modi regime. Modi himself was part of RSS, an extremely fanatical group who were responsible for the mass murder of a number of Muslims.
I think most Americans would be outraged to know that the victims of the crime were the ones arrested. Were they released?
They were released a day later after an intensive interview. However, one priest and 5 of his comrades have been falsely accused of having forcibly converted a Hindu man who seems to be changing his statement and appeared on NDTV saying he didn't want to speak about the issue because it would get him more involved in the process. I believe his fear is the more he gets involved, the more people see through his lies. I mean, in his comment to the local police, he said that he was dipped in water in a river to wash him of his sins and given 10,000 rupees. The strange thing is, this is a Catholic community we're talking about. Catholics don't use full water immersion. That's a very Protestant ritual for the baptism rites. So when you think about this, it's obvious that the allegations are fallacious, yet the charges still stand, and these men will have to go to trial before they're exonerated. For me, this is such an abuse of a law that is designed to persecute and marginalize Christians. And until Modi and his awful regime start to think more egalitarian about the people living in their midst, Christians and other minorities will only have a worsening quality of life. If nothing else, it's probably now reached its lowest ebb.
Okay, beat up and arrested for singing Christmas carols in the world's largest democracy. Wilson Chowdhry of British Pakistani Christians, thank you so much, and thanks for keeping us on top of this. I know you'll keep an eye on it. Thank you. Despite church tragedies like the one in Pakistan this Christmas season, Christians around the world pour into their places of worship to honor and celebrate the birth of Jesus. And one Christian couple is spending this important holiday season overseas this year with some special people. Recently, they moved their entire American family to Taiwan to introduce the people there to Christ. Joining us now is Richard Roberts. He's a Christian missionary, pastor, and the founder of Northeast Church in Taiwan. So, Richard, thanks for joining us. What makes Taiwan so attractive to you? Why did you move there?
It was really a calling from God. With my local church back in the States. I'd been on several short-term mission trips, and I think after about the third trip, I began to feel that God was calling me and my wife and family to do a long-term mission. And as we prayed about it, God centered in on Taiwan.
And you have a special outreach this Christmas, a program in your church. Why is it different or so special this year?
Well, this year, and actually we've started doing this several years ago, but we felt like that if we could just keep repeating the same nativity story every year, that the people here in Northeast Taiwan would hear it. And just like the Bible says, faith comes by hearing God's word. And so we tell the story over and over. And what was unique about it is that we were able to go into different schools and do it. And when we first started doing it, it was just like 4 or 5 schools, but now we're up to 13 schools. And so we have 15 events in 13 schools, and we go in and we tell the nativity story through song and through story and through question and answers, and we also give them a Christmas gift. And so it's a very wonderful time and a wonderful joy for my wife and my family and I to be able to go in and do this along with other missionaries that are working with us.
And what kind of response are you getting? Because I know Taiwan is primarily a Buddhist country, and some people I'm sure are animists as well. What kind of response are you getting from them?
Well, we heard one teacher just today as we was at one school. They said to us, thank you for bringing joy into the kids' lives. And so I don't know what exactly what that means, like what's happening with, at home or at school or in other places. But I do know that the teacher recognized that there was a sense of joy during the program. And we try to hug the kids, and we try to, be happy and excited, when we see them. And we just love on them, and we tell them the story, and we don't shy away. We just share it, and they just feel it in their hearts. And so the joy, I think, is really just overcoming to anyone when you're spreading the joy of Christ.
And why children? Why not adults?
Well, like you said earlier, that predominantly there's a lot of people that believe in other religions here. And it's not just Buddhism, but it's also Taoism and other folk religions. But when they hear about Jesus and they hear that story, it feels different to them. And we've heard time and time again that, and it's really going back to the joy. We hear stories of joy. And I guess that means that in some of the other belief systems, joy may not be represented so much in their system.
And I'm sure they see joy in your life, in your witness, and how much you really care and love them. I'm sure that makes a difference, doesn't it?
Well, I hope so. We really have a genuine joy. That we have about 9 missionaries, including my family, that are working together in this project. And we love the Lord, we love Jesus, and we all, come from other churches, originally where we had joy built into our lives, where, elders that spoke into us, and we saw the joy in them, and we wanted it. And now that we feel that God has given us that joy, we just want to spread it to the people here in Northeast Taiwan and hope that it's contagious here as well.
Okay, shouts of joy this Christmas season, sharing the good news in Taiwan. Richard Roberts, thank you so much. May God continue to bless your work and efforts in Taiwan.
Thank you.
Tensions on the Korean Peninsula have increased drastically since North Korea's recent missile launch. The missile launched on November 28th was Pyongyang's most powerful to date, with an estimated range of 2,800 miles. Well, joining us to discuss more on the growing threat to the United States and the world is Thomas Donnelly of the American Enterprise Institute. Mr. Donnelly, how great is this missile threat to America at this time?
It's really limited in terms of what any weapon could do or how far it could reach into the continental United States. But it's qualitatively a huge step forward, not just for North Korea, but in terms of who can threaten the United States, because we must expect that the North Koreans will build more such missiles, and that others around the world, smaller nations, otherwise completely insignificant nations like North Korea, will have this ability to threaten Americans here at home.
So there is a concern about nuclear proliferation. During his recent Asia trip, I know President Trump urged China to play a more active role in stopping North Korea. Why aren't the Chinese doing more?
There are two reasons. One, their ability to control, especially the current ruler of North Korea, Kim Jong Un, is not as great as it used to be. But more broadly, and I think more seriously, the Chinese are not that disturbed by it, even though they've said how dangerous the threat is and so on and so forth. North Korea cannot exist without Chinese aid, economic access, and so many other things. So the North Korean state remains, as it has long been, something of a creation of the Chinese government. And you have to think, after all these years, that if the Chinese were more concerned about Pyongyang, we wouldn't be here in the first place.
Do you think the North Koreans are getting some of their missile technology from the Chinese? Where are they getting it?
But they're also they've sort of cut and pasted from a lot of sources, including Pakistan and Iran. They're an important part of a long-running proliferation network throughout the world. Of course, they've been working on these technologies for decades and decades. They're not the most sophisticated technologies in the world. It's just surprising that it's all come together rather quickly for them.
There's some indication that North Korea is now preparing another launch. How concerned should we be about that?
Their ability to launch these missiles should not be undersold. They have increased the pace of launches. They've increased the sophistication of the path that the missiles fly. The missiles are growing in size and power. So they have quite an inventory of long-range missiles now.
And I know the American Enterprise Institute and you have been following this for a long time. So what is Kim Jong Un trying to accomplish here?
Well, two things. And I personally believe, and I think North Korean rhetoric and behavior bear this out very clearly. They're, first of all, interested in deterring us from taking any action against them and in preserving the regime. But it's also the case that North Korea wants to reunify the Korean Peninsula under its rule, essentially to make South Korea go away. That has always been North Korea's ambition. They have not given it up. The nuclear capabilities that they're building are meant to deter us, but by the same token, they're meant to intimidate the South and to bring them to the negotiating table to cut a deal that would be favorable to Pyongyang.
Well, what then should be done to prevent Kim Jong Un from continuing these launches and his threats?
Well, the most important first step is to improve our missile defenses. Of all the programs that were terminated during the Obama years, the one that we are probably lamenting the most right now was a research project for what's known as an airborne laser. And to be sure, this was very much a science project. It was basically a giant 747 with a huge chemical laser inside it. So it was meant to demonstrate the technology of what is known in the missile defense business as boost phase intercept. That is to intercept the missile as soon as possible after launch. before it can deploy decoys, when it's most vulnerable, et cetera, et cetera. And really, that's the only way to be sure of intercepting an intercontinental range missile. And I just have to think that if that program had continued and had received the kind of funding that we now see being thrown in desperation at a host of other missile defense programs, we'd be in far better shape vis-a-vis North Korea. The best thing that we could do would be to shoot down a couple of these things and prove that they're not the deterrent, they're not the effective threat that they currently pose to us.
The stock market has soared this year, rising more than 5,000 points. That's never happened before. And consumer confidence is up, way up. When the final figures are in, Americans will likely have spent more on Christmas this year than last Christmas, probably on things like phones, tablets, other gadgets. And our man on the street, Mung Fei Lee, was curious, did people truly spend more, and if so, on what? He wanted to know about some of the more popular gifts purchased.
It's the time of the year. Shopping season's here. Yeah. Let's go. Did you spend more money this year on Christmas compared with the previous years?
No. We do about the same thing every year.
Probably not. Honestly, I probably spent less. Honestly.
Our family, we collectively decided to spend less money this year. In fact, my parents, instead of giving us gifts, they've decided to give large donations to charities in our honor, in our name.
Did you spend more money on Christmas gifts this year than your previous years?
Probably because I'm older and my friends like more expensive gifts.
That's a very good answer.
I'm getting my friend earrings from Free People, but I like shopping online too, so yeah, that's where I got them.
Yeah, I got my friend some things from Amazon online.
Okay. Now, did you spend more money Amazon than in stores normally?
I probably spend more money online, yeah, than in stores.
I feel like I spend more in stores because it's easier to find deals online, you can search a lot more, so.
Okay, cool. All right, thank you, ladies. Did you spend more money this year online than your previous years?
Yes, a lot more.
Well, somebody, I think, got a Christmas bonus check.
I bought a lot of things for my family, printers, toys, gift cards.
Now, would you say you spent more money this year for Christmas gifts than last year?
I'm gonna say about the same.
Well, I got her a treadmill. That's what she wanted. It was first on her list.
Did you spend more money on Christmas gift this year than your previous years?
Yes. Just because of the treadmill. It's a big ticket item.
That's right.
I haven't purchased much. I bought something for my new granddaughter, and I still got some shopping to do. Hopefully I can get some bargains.
Now, did you spend more money this year on Christmas gifts than last year?
No, I'm not going to.
Why not?
Because I think we have most of what we need. You know, we buy all through the year what we need, and Christmas time is just a little what we may want, and I think we've been blessed enough.
Yeah. All right, thank you, ladies. Thank you. All right, Merry Christmas.
With tax reform behind them, President Trump and Congress are now focusing on the budget. Will the new budget include funds for building a wall along the U.S. southern border? Remember, Donald Trump campaigned extensively on immigration and the wall. He's not backed down as president.
If we get not only surveillance, but everything that goes along with surveillance, and ultimately we have to have the wall. If we don't have the wall, we're doing nothing.
Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer says he, Nancy Pelosi, and the congressional Democrats are willing to work a deal on DACA. That's the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program, the so-called Dreamers. But they won't give the president 1 cent for building a wall.
We're not for the wall. We'll never be for the wall. It's expensive. It's ineffective. It involves a lot of difficult eminent domain, taking people's property. And apparently, it's not being paid for by Mexico.
Schumer hasn't stooped to calling the president names, at least he hasn't done so publicly, but others on the extreme left have called President Trump a racist for wanting to construct a wall along the Mexican border. It seems whenever those on the left struggle with arguing the facts, they resort to name-calling. Now, the U.S. Supreme Court allowed Trump's travel ban to move forward. Still, some have called the president an Islamophobe for proposing it. So let's just for a moment set aside race and all the rabid rhetoric and imagine that we're all members of one human race. Absent all the demagogic noise, we may just see that Trump's proposal makes sense to better protect America. The travel ban is against 8 countries. Yes, 5 of them are Islamic. Some people may ask, how come Saudi Arabia, home to the 9/11 terrorists, isn't on that list? Well, 9/11 was more than 16 years ago. Times have changed. So has the threat. The countries listed are those where potential terrorists now reside, those deemed by our intelligence agencies as posing the greatest threat to America at this time. And what about that wall? 8 prototypes have been built. Will it run along the entire U.S.-Mexico border? That's highly unlikely, despite what the president says, because it would cost hugely, billions and billions more than Donald Trump's personal fortune. Now, new Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen says erecting a wall really means putting in place a wall of tightened security along America's southern border. Walling will be built in some locations, especially those vulnerable to infiltration and breaches. Other areas will have fencing, motion sensors, cameras, maybe even drone surveillance, and of course, more people. Additional Border Patrol agents will be added. So the effort is not racist at all. It's protecting this country from M13 gangs who run drugs and guns across the border and spread violence in at least 42 American states. Tightened security is needed to better protect the country from terrorist infiltrators and other criminals. Now, most Americans lock their doors at night to keep unwanted guests out. When someone knocks or rings your doorbell, do you open the door without checking who it is? Don't you ask who is there, what they want? You don't just let anyone in to trash your house, do you? Well, it's the same with the U.S. border. It makes sense to implement tighter border controls, stricter vetting of people coming from countries of concern, visitors and immigrants who may pose a security threat. Now, that approach has nothing to do with DACA and the Dreamers, and to me, it's a separate issue, one for another commentary. In the meantime, we as Christians need to take the lead to advance reasoned immigration and security reforms. Yes, we are a nation that believes in the rule of law, but whether they're here legally or illegally, immigrants must still be treated with dignity and respect. We must have discernment and the wisdom of Solomon about who we let in when they knock on that American door. In Matthew 10:16, we're told, we are like sheep in the midst of wolves, so be wise as serpents and innocent as doves. Yes, America could use a little reasoned wisdom right now, but let's be careful not to lose our innocence and compassion for other people. Well, that's it from the Global Lane this week. Catch us on Facebook, Twitter, SoundCloud, YouTube, and iTunes. And until next time, be blessed.